courtroom was dead silent. Every eye in the room was locked on the judge as he glared down at the teenager standing before him. The boy, Ethan Walker, had barely spoken a word since stepping inside. Hands stuffed in his pockets, messy brown hair falling over his face, his expression unreadable. He wasn't scared. He wasn't nervous. He was just there. Judge Morton, a man notorious for his sharp tongue and even sharper temper, let out a scoff. He leaned forward, staring at Ethan like he was something pathetic. Well, the judge said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. What do we have here? A young man too afraid to speak? Or maybe you don't even understand what's happening. The audience chuckled. A few loud laughs echoed through the room. But Ethan? He didn't even blink. The judge smirked. Let me guess, you're one of those kids who think they're smarter than everyone else, huh? He leaned back, shaking his head. Kids like you end up nowhere. You're wasting everyone's time. Do you even have a brain in that head of yours, or is it just empty space? More laughter. A few whispers. And then, Ethan did something no one expected. Slowly, he lifted his head, locking eyes with Judge Morton. And then, for the first time, he spoke. His voice was calm. Steady. But his words? His words made the entire courtroom freeze. Actually, Your Honor, Ethan said, tilting his head slightly. If you're done mocking me, I'd like to correct the mistake in your ruling before an innocent man goes to prison. Silence. Judge Morton's face drained of color. The gasps rippled through the room like a wave. Lawyers turned so fast, it was a miracle they didn't snap their necks. That was the moment everyone realized Ethan Walker wasn't just some quiet kid. He was a genius. 3 weeks earlier, Ethan sat at the back of his classroom at Roosevelt High, scribbling in his notebook. Around him, students laughed, whispered, passed notes. He didn't care. He had accepted a long time ago, he didn't fit in. It wasn't that he didn't want friends. It was just, every time he spoke, people either got bored or confused. So he stayed quiet. Instead, he buried himself in books on quantum physics, solved logic puzzles for fun, and even hacked into random systems, nothing illegal, just to see if he could. But home was a different kind of challenge. His mom, Lisa Walker, worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. His dad had walked out years ago, leaving behind nothing but bills and broken promises. Ethan wanted to help. But what could a 16-year-old kid do? Then, one night, while scrolling through legal case files, something he did for fun, he found something. A court case that made his stomach twist. A man named Daniel Grayson was about to go to prison for a crime he didn't commit. Ethan didn't know him, but the evidence in the case? It was wrong. The prosecutors had missed something. A small mistake. But small enough to send an innocent man to prison for life. Ethan stayed up all night digging. He analyzed documents, checked timestamps, even accessed court files that were not supposed to be public. By morning, he had proof. There was just one problem. Who would listen to a 16-year-old nobody? For days, he tried reaching out, lawyers, reporters, anyone who would hear him out. They all ignored him. Until one desperate call changed everything. Lisa Walker, exhausted from work, barely had the energy to argue when Ethan insisted they go to the courthouse. "This is insane, Ethan," she said, rubbing her temples. "You're not a lawyer. You're a kid." "But I'm right," Ethan shot back. "Mom, I can prove it." Against her better judgment, she took him. And that's how Ethan ended up in Judge Morton's courtroom, where a man's fate was hanging by a thread, and a boy no one took seriously was about to change everything. But just as Ethan opened his mouth to reveal the truth, the courtroom doors burst open. 2 officers stormed in, hands on their guns. "Step away from the bench." Now, one of them shouted. Ethan froze. His mother gasped. The judge's face went from pale to furious. What is the meaning of this? One of the officers pointed straight at Ethan. This kid hacked into the court's database. We have reason to believe he's been accessing classified information illegally. A ripple of gasps spread through the courtroom. Ethan's heart pounded. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't the one who should be in trouble. He was trying to stop a mistake, not commit one. But now, instead of proving Daniel Grayson's innocence, Ethan Walker was about to be arrested. The cold steel of the handcuffs snapped around his wrists. His mother screamed. The audience murmured in shock. The judge slammed his gavel over and over. Order! Order in the court! Judge Morton turned to the officers, his face red with fury. You're telling me this kid, this quiet, unremarkable teenager, hacked into government files? Yes, Your Honor, one of the officers confirmed. We received a security alert about an unauthorized breach in the system. Traced it back to this kid's laptop. Lisa Walker shot to her feet. Her voice was shaking. This is a mistake. My son isn't a criminal. He was just trying to help. Ethan, still eerily calm, turned to the judge. And what he said next would change everything. Let me explain, Ethan started. Silence! Judge Morton roared, slamming his gavel. His face was tense, his fingers rubbing at his temples like he was trying to process the impossible. You're telling me you hacked into court records? Ethan took a deep breath. He had a choice. Deny everything and hope they let him go. Or admit the truth and risk everything. He chose the truth. Yes, Your Honor, he said, voice steady. I accessed the case files. But not to cause harm. His eyes met the judge's. I found an error in your ruling. If you send Daniel Grayson to prison, you will be punishing an innocent man. The courtroom went dead silent. Even Judge Morton hesitated, thrown off by the teenager's confidence. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man in a pristine suit, folded his arms and let out a condescending chuckle. And what makes you think a teenager knows more than the legal professionals who worked on this case? Ethan turned to face him, unfazed. Because they made a mistake, he said, voice unwavering. And I can prove it. Judge Morton narrowed his eyes. Fine. Since you seem so sure of yourself, tell me. What mistake did I make? Ethan exhaled, steadying himself. Your Honor, the case against Daniel Grayson relies on security footage from a bank robbery, he explained. The prosecution used a timestamp to place him at the scene, stating he entered the bank at 9:42 a.m. But that footage was tampered with. The prosecutor rolled his eyes. That's ridiculous. Ethan ignored him. The original file was compressed when it was entered as evidence. When that happens, metadata is altered. I ran a forensic analysis on the publicly available copy of the video and found inconsistencies. The judge leaned forward. What kind of inconsistencies? Ethan didn't hesitate. The lighting in the footage. The shadow angles. They don't match the time of day the video claims to be from. The sun should have been coming from the east at 9:42 a.m., but in the footage, it's positioned like it was almost noon. His gaze locked onto the judge. Someone altered the timestamp. Murmurs spread through the courtroom. The prosecutor's face turned red. This is absurd. He's just a kid. You expect us to believe he analyzed security footage better than a team of professionals? Ethan shrugged. You don't have to believe me. Just pull up the unaltered footage from the bank's security system. Compare it to the file submitted to the court. If I'm wrong, I'll take full responsibility. A tense silence filled the room. Judge Morton studied Ethan for a long moment. The arrogance he had shown earlier was gone, replaced by something else, something like curiosity. Finally, he turned to a court officer. Contact the bank. Request the original footage. The prosecutor slammed his hands on the table. Your Honor, This is a waste of time. Judge Morton shot him a sharp look. You're the one claiming the evidence is solid. So if this kid is wrong, then you have nothing to worry about, right? The prosecutor's jaw clenched. But he said nothing. Ethan's mother watched in stunned silence, her breath caught in her throat. Minutes later, a court official rushed back in, a laptop in his hands. His face was tense. Your Honor, he said, slightly out of breath, we received a live copy of the bank's unedited footage. Judge Morton leaned forward. Play it. The entire courtroom held its breath. The official hit play. A grainy black and white video flickered onto the screen. The bank's interior. Customers. A few tellers behind the counter. And then, the moment of truth. At exactly 9:42 a.m., the doors opened. A man walked in. But it wasn't Daniel Grayson. Gasps rippled through the room. Lisa Walker's hand flew to her mouth. The prosecutor went pale. Judge Morton's eyes widened. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Told you. The timestamp was fake. The judge sat there, his gavel hovering over his desk. Slowly, he turned to the prosecutor. I assume you have an explanation for this? The man stammered, his confidence gone. I don't understand how. Judge Morton raised a hand, cutting him off. Enough. He let out a long breath, then turned back to Ethan. You're telling me you figured this out on your own? Ethan nodded. Yes, sir. The judge steadied him, then let out a low chuckle. Well, I'll be damned. I've been a judge for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like this. He gestured toward the officers still flanking Ethan. Get those cuffs off him. Now. They hesitated, then obeyed, unclicking the metal around Ethan's wrists. He rubbed his hands, his skin raw from the tight grip of the cuffs. He turned to his mother, who was staring at him like he was a stranger. Judge Morton cleared his throat. I will personally see to it that Daniel Grayson's case is reviewed immediately. Then, his eyes flicked back to Ethan. As for you, young man, I don't know whether to scold you for hacking into court records or offer you a job. Laughter rippled through the courtroom. Ethan just gave a small shrug. I'm not looking for a job, he said. I just didn't want to see an innocent man go to prison. Judge Morton nodded slowly. You've got guts, kid. And one hell of a brain. But before anyone could celebrate, the courtroom doors slammed open. And what happened next would change everything. The courtroom doors burst open. A man in a black suit strode in, his face unreadable, his movements sharp and deliberate. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight to the judge, leaned in, and whispered something in his ear. Judge Morton's expression changed instantly. His jaw tightened. His fingers gripped the edge of his desk like he was bracing for impact. Then he turned back to Ethan. His eyes were different now. Sharper. More cautious. Young man, the judge said carefully. I need you to come with us. Right now. Ethan frowned. Why? Judge Morton's voice was grave. Because it turns out you weren't the only one looking at that case. Ethan's stomach dropped. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And before he could even process it, two more officers stepped forward. This time, they weren't here for a misunderstanding. They were here for something else. Something much, much worse. Ethan barely had time to react before the officers flanked him, their faces blank, unreadable. His mother let out a panicked cry. She reached for him, but one of the officers lifted a hand. Ma'am, stay back, the taller one ordered. Lisa Walker's voice shook. What are you doing? You just cleared him. He didn't do anything wrong. Wrong? Judge Morton's face was hard, stripped of arrogance, replaced by something else. Something heavier. More serious. He turned to Ethan. Son, you need to come with us. Now. Ethan's mind raced. The judge wasn't just being stern, he was being careful. He wasn't mocking him anymore, which meant whatever was happening. It was bigger than just this courtroom. Ethan met his mother's terrified gaze and gave her a small nod, the only reassurance he could offer. Then he turned back to the judge. All right, he said. But you need to tell me what's going on. The man in the black suit stepped forward. His hair was slicked back, his tie perfectly pressed, his expression eerily blank, the kind of face that belonged to a man who had spent years keeping secrets. My name is Agent Carter, he said, his voice smooth, controlled. I work for the federal government. Ethan's heart skipped. The feds. Carter reached into his coat and pulled out a slim tablet. He swiped across the screen, then turned it so Ethan could see. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. There, on the screen, was a security log. Not from the courthouse. Not from any local system. This was from the Department of Justice. And Ethan's name was all over it. 12 hours earlier. Ethan sat hunched over his laptop in his dimly lit bedroom, the glow of the screen illuminating his face. His desk was cluttered with notebooks filled with scribbled codes, timestamps, legal loopholes. He had spent the last few nights obsessed with Daniel Grayson's case, combing through legal documents, archived files, and security footage that most people didn't even know existed. He wasn't trying to break the law. He was just trying to find the truth. But when he hacked into the courthouse database, something strange happened. The file he was searching for with Grayson's original case records had a security tag on it. That wasn't normal. Court records weren't supposed to have that kind of restriction unless they were classified. And yet, every time Ethan tried to access it, the system flagged him. That's when he realized something was off. Someone didn't want this case reviewed. And whoever that was had the power to bury it at the highest level. Ethan spent the next hour trying to bypass the security alert. Not to hide his tracks, not to erase anything, just to understand why this particular case had been marked. And then, his screen went black. A single message popped up in red text. Access restricted. Trace initiated. Ethan's stomach plummeted. He had triggered something. Something big. Before he could shut everything down, the power in his house flickered. The entire block went dark for 10 full seconds. And when the lights came back on, Ethan knew someone was coming for him. Now, standing in the courtroom, looking at the federal security logs with his own name plastered across them, Ethan realized exactly what had happened. This wasn't just about Daniel Grayson. This wasn't just a mistake in a case file. He had tripped over something much, much bigger than he had expected. Agent Carter slipped the tablet back into his coat. Mr. Walker, he said, his voice cold, calculating. You accessed files that belong to the federal government. That is a serious offense. Ethan swallowed but kept his expression neutral. I wasn't trying to do anything illegal, he said evenly. I just wanted to know why an innocent man was being set up. Agent Carter's lips pressed into a thin line. That's exactly what we need to talk about. Judge Morton exhaled, rubbing his chin. Agent Carter, I assume this conversation isn't meant to happen here? Carter nodded. We need to move him to a secure location. Lisa Walker stepped in front of Ethan, her hands shaking. No, she said, her voice firm but laced with panic. You are not taking my son anywhere. He's just a kid. Carter gave her a long, unreadable look. Then, surprisingly, his voice softened. Ma'am, I promise you, he's not in trouble. He hesitated. But he's in danger. And if you want to keep him safe, he needs to come with us. Now. Lisa hesitated. Ethan could see the terror in her eyes. He reached out, squeezed her hand gently. Mom, he whispered. I'll be okay. She shook her head, breath unsteady. I don't understand. Why is this happening? Ethan turned back to Carter. Yeah, why is this happening? Carter glanced around the room, then leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Because, kid, he said, voice eerily calm. The case you just exposed, it wasn't just a mistake. Ethan's heart pounded. Then what was it? Carter's expression didn't change. It was a cover-up. And just like that, everything changed. Carter's eyes were dead serious. I mean, he said slowly, someone wanted Daniel Grayson in prison. Badly. And if you found out the truth, he exhaled. That means you just got in the way of something dangerous. Silence. Then, bang. The sound of a gunshot exploded through the courthouse. Screams erupted. People dove for cover. Lisa yanked Ethan down as a second shot rang out. The courtroom doors slammed open. A man in a dark hoodie charged inside, his gun raised. Carter grabbed his radio. We have a breach. We need backup, now. The gunman didn't hesitate. His eyes locked on Ethan. And then, he ran straight at him. Ethan's chest tightened. Someone wanted him silenced. And now, they weren't just trying to arrest him. They were trying to kill him. The world slowed. Ethan barely had time to react before the gunman lunged. His heart pounded as he ducked, just as a bullet whizzed past his ear. Crack. Another shot. Screams. Chaos. Get down. Carter bellowed, drawing his weapon in a flash. Lisa clung to Ethan, shielding him with her body. Ethan, she sobbed. Stay down, baby. Please. But Ethan knew. This wasn't a random attack. This was targeted. Someone wanted him gone. Judge Morton dove behind the bench, cursing under his breath. Court officers scrambled, pulling their weapons, but the shooter was fast, weaving through the chaos, his gun locked on Ethan. He's here for me. The realization sent a cold chill through Ethan's spine. The gunman raised his weapon and fired. At the last second, a strong hand yanked Ethan backward. The bullet shattered the wooden railing where he'd been standing just moments ago. It was Carter. Move, the agent barked, shoving Ethan toward the exit. We're getting out of here, now. Two officers tackled the gunman, slamming him to the ground. His weapon clattered across the floor. But Ethan knew it wasn't over. If there was one assassin, there could be more. Carter grabbed Ethan's wrist, dragging him toward a side exit. Get him out of here, he shouted to another agent, shoving Ethan into the man's arms. Lisa tried to follow, but Carter held her back. Ma'am, we'll keep him safe. Stay down. Ethan's heart screamed no, but arguing would only slow them down. He was swept into a back hallway, the agent practically carrying him as they ran. Outside, police sirens howled. Ethan gasped between breaths. Who was that? The agent's grip tightened. Someone who doesn't want you alive. Minutes later, Ethan was shoved into the back of a black SUV. The doors slammed shut. The tires screeched as they peeled away from the courthouse. Carter climbed into the passenger seat, breathing heavily. He turned to the driver. Any sign of pursuit? All clear, the driver replied. For now. Ethan pressed his palms against the cool leather seat, trying to steady his breathing. Can someone please tell me what's going on? Carter exhaled, rubbing his temples. You don't get it, kid, he said. That wasn't just some random shooter. His voice darkened. Someone powerful is watching you. You exposed something bigger than you realize. Ethan clenched his fists. Then tell me what it is. Carter hesitated. He steadied Ethan, his expression unreadable. Then finally, he spoke. Daniel Grayson's case, he said slowly. It wasn't just a setup. It was a cover-up. And you just ripped the lid off something people would kill to keep buried. Ethan swallowed hard. Who? Carter turned in his seat, facing him fully. I don't know yet, but we're about to find out. The SUV sped down the highway, weaving through traffic like a shark cutting through water. Ethan could feel the tension in the air. Carter was on high alert, his eyes flicking to the side mirrors every few seconds, scanning for any sign that they were being followed. Ethan's mind raced. Someone had just tried to kill him. Not scare him. Not warn him. Kill him. And now he was locked in a speeding vehicle with a federal agent who might be the only person keeping him alive. Ethan took a deep breath. Where are we going? Carter didn't take his eyes off the road. Somewhere safe. Ethan frowned. That's not an answer. Carter sighed. Kid, you need to understand something. You're in the middle of something way bigger than you realize. The people behind this? They don't play games. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then tell me what I stepped into. Carter hesitated. Then, after a long pause, he spoke. The case you cracked, Daniel Grayson's case, it wasn't just some small-time mistake. That case was sealed. And not just by a judge. Ethan's breath caught. Sealed by who? Carter's voice was grave. By someone in the government. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. That doesn't make sense. He shook his head. Why would the government want to frame an innocent man? Carter's grip on the dashboard tightened. Asterisk, it's not about him. Ethan sat up straighter. Then what is it about? Carter looked at him, his jaw tight, his expression grim. It's about what he saw. And in that moment, Ethan realized he wasn't just running from a conspiracy. He was running from the truth. The truth was never meant to be found. Daniel Grayson wasn't just an innocent man, he was an auditor. 3 months ago, he uncovered a massive financial discrepancy, millions of dollars missing from federal funds. Someone in power was stealing. And when Grayson got too close, they framed him. Ethan's pulse quickened. If he had figured this out, it meant they knew he knew. And that meant he was in serious danger. The SUV veered off the highway, stopping in front of a secluded cabin. Carter killed the engine. For now, this is where you stay. Ethan eyed the place. Seriously? A creepy cabin in the middle of nowhere? You expecting a 5-star hotel? Carter smirked. Ethan sighed. Fine. But I need my laptop. Carter steadied him. Kid, you have no idea what you're dealing with. Ethan met his gaze. I think I do. Carter shook his head. You're either the smartest kid I've ever met, or the dumbest. Ethan shrugged. Probably both. Inside, the cabin was bare, just a bed, a desk, and scattered papers. Carter pulled out a metal case, revealing a satellite phone, a gun, and classified files. We lay low until I figure out who's behind this. Ethan folded his arms. So, I do nothing? Carter shot him a look. I just pulled you out of a courtroom where someone tried to shoot you. You don't get to argue. Ethan sighed. Then get me my laptop. Carter exhaled. You really think you can out-hack the people after you? Ethan smirked. I already did once. Carter grumbled, tossing him a duffel. Everything you need is in there. Do anything stupid, and I pull the plug. Ethan powered up his laptop and got to work. 2 hours later, Ethan stared at his screen, heart pounding. He had bypassed 3 firewalls, rerouted his connection, and now he was looking at the smoking gun. A list. Thousands of transactions. Money moved through private accounts, but the names attached weren't just random people. They were government officials. Carter loomed over him. How far up does it go? Ethan clicked on a file labeled Priority 1. The screen loaded. A single name. Carter inhaled sharply. No way. Ethan clenched his fists. The name on the screen wasn't just some corrupt bureaucrat. It was a U.S. senator. Before they could react, the cabin lights flickered. Then, "Warning, you have been detected." Carter grabbed his gun. They found us. Outside, tires screeched. Headlights cut through the trees. More than one SUV. Ethan's blood ran cold. How did they track us? Carter gritted his teeth. Doesn't matter. Move. The first SUV doors slammed open. Armed men in black tactical gear stepped out, no badges, no insignia. They weren't police. They were something worse. A bullet shattered the cabin window. Go! Carter bellowed, shoving Ethan toward the back door. They ran. Through the dense forest. The ground uneven, branches cutting across their skin. Gunfire cracked behind them. They reached a clearing. Carter pulled Ethan behind a fallen tree. Stay quiet. Footsteps approached. They're close, a voice growled. Then, over a radio. Pull back. Movement near the road. A long pause. Then, retreating footsteps. Ethan's pulse thundered. Carter exhaled. Too close. An hour later. They reached a hidden vehicle, an SUV parked under thick brush. Carter tossed Ethan a new set of clothes. Where are we going now? Ethan asked. Carter tightened his grip on the wheel. Somewhere they won't find us. And then? Carter sighed. Then, we figure out who's behind this. Ethan's mind raced. They had the evidence. The files. The names. But it wouldn't matter unless they exposed the senator. And their enemies weren't just powerful. They controlled the narrative. Minutes later, Carter's phone buzzed. His face darkened. He handed the screen to Ethan. Breaking news. FBI issues arrest warrant for teen hacker Ethan Walker. National security threat. Ethan's breath caught. They flipped the story. They weren't just trying to silence him. They were making sure no one would believe him. Carter gritted his teeth. They're cutting off our options. Ethan steeled himself. Then we only have one move left. Carter glanced at him. Which is? Ethan's fingers tightened around his laptop. We trapped the senator. Carter smirked. You got a plan, kid? Ethan exhaled. Yeah. But it's risky. Carter chuckled. Risky is what we do. Washington, D.C., that night. The gala was packed. Politicians, billionaires, media moguls. And at the center of it all, Senator Richardson. Ethan and Carter slipped inside, dressed for the occasion. This is stupid, Ethan muttered, adjusting his stolen tuxedo. Carter smirked. Relax, kid. You almost look normal. Ethan's eyes locked onto the senator. Game time. He pulled out his phone. One tap, and every news station in the country received the files. Then, a hand clamped onto his shoulder. Ethan turned, face to face with a man in black. A whisper. You shouldn't have come here. The man reached inside his jacket. Bang! The hitman jerked violently, a bullet tearing through his chest. His gun clattered to the marble floor. Carter yanked Ethan back. Move! Chaos erupted. Guests screamed. Security scrambled. And then, ladies and gentlemen, Ethan's head snapped toward the stage. There, adjusting his tie, standing completely unfazed, Senator Richardson. His cold eyes locked onto Ethan. A slow smirk. He knows. Apologies for the disturbance, Richardson said smoothly. It seems we have a trespasser. Carter cursed. We need to get out. Now. Ethan shook his head. No. We're finishing this. He raised his phone, tapped the screen. and every screen in the ballroom flickered to life. The truth played in full color. Bank statements, laundered transactions, the senator's voice on leaked recordings. Gasps rippled through the room. A reporter whispered into her mic, breaking news. Richardson's smirk vanished. He turned to security. Arrest him. But no one moved. Because now, the whole world was watching. Moments later, FBI agents swarmed the room. Senator Richardson, you're under arrest. As they cuffed him, Richardson's voice was deadly calm. You don't understand, kid, he murmured. Men like me don't go to prison. Ethan met his gaze. You will. And just like that, it was over.